That is absolutely true, Vince. Um, a casually statement that Pilate had Jesus flogged, and then of course the abuse that came out of. We're actually going to be. I think we're coming in right after that, the aftermath. But that is so true. And good morning, fellas, and welcome to our Bible study. We're going to proceed. We are the second week into chapter 19, and we're in the midst of this long, drug out interaction between Jesus, Pilate, and the crowd. And John, it's exclusive to John, and so therefore, because John wrote that and he has an intention in writing that, we're attempting to engage in his narrative and draw out meaning out of it. So let's move into verses 5 and 6, and this is about pressure. Of course, pressure is a reoccurring um, it it's a reoccurring theme in this whole mounting narrative of what is happening in the Praetorium, the Roman place of government in Jerusalem. And we're going to continue with uh, pressure or mounting pressure. Verses 5 and 6 reads, Jesus then came out, referring back to what Vince has said, he came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, the crowd, remember the praetorium, which is the pavement, the judgment, the court, is inside the courthouse, for lack of a better term or a modern term. And the Jewish officials, the Jewish people wouldn't go in. Well, there wasn't room for everybody, but the officials would not go in because they didn't want to be defiled in this pagan place. So Pilate is moving in and out, inside. And when the term praetorium, the pavement, the judgment uh, uh, plaza is mentioned, he's inside, but now he's coming outside and to where the crowd is, and he says, behold the man. You've heard that echo homo. Behold the man. So when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they shouted, crying, crucify, crucify. Pilate said to them, take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no grounds for charges in his case. Again, this is a very long, drawn out process. The heat is being turned up. There's my little cartoon of the pressure cooker. The burner is being turned up and the pressure is mounting in primarily in Pilate, and we'll be looking at that. In John's account, which is exclusive to John, much more detail, we see three things happening. Pilate is experiencing overwhelming pressure. As the heat is increasing, he is feeling pressure. And the reason he is feeling pressure is entirely because he's putting that pressure upon himself. Sure, it's an intense situation, but we see what a human being in power is doing or how he's responding under pressure as pressure mounts. He can make choices which are within the realm of his leadership, but he refuses to do that. And there are reasons why. He's yielding to the pressure, he's fearful, he is ingrained or engaged within his own ego, and he is not unlike in a more intense sense, but I know this quite well, having experienced this myself. The second is the religious elite, and they are in a state of rage. They are promoting the crowd, um, and they're angry. The term, the two terms, crucify him, or crucify, crucify. It's not. It's down to one word, crucify. They want him dead. And then in contrast, we have the silent Jesus, centered, absorbing it all, as Steve, the album cover this morning, Be Still My Soul, or oh, I lost the term. What was the cover's name? Sorry, I got you while you're chewing. Something about being
Sheila,
sentenced.
what was your question?
Well, what was on the cover of that album? The album name was "Be Still My Soul," or
That's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
"Be Still," and that is how we see the person of Jesus within this setting. And this is really, really important. John cast it that way, and we're diving into it to try to understand and to feel the intensity of this occasion. So Pilate has a plan. His plan is not working. And I've taken the liberty through Chat GPT to derive these little images that show the Pilate that we've seen in previous studies. He's got a new head, and his head is a pressure cooker, and he is, of course, experiencing pressure. As the fingers are pointing to him, he is feeling the pressure. In verse 5, it says, Jesus came out, he was escorted out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to the crowd, Behold the man. We first need to note that this is Pilate's third declaration of Jesus' innocence, and then the other two references are there on the screen. He's not done yet, but he has declared um, three times up to this point that he believes Jesus is innocent, but he's not governing from that perspective. Because of this, we interpret his actions. See, this is why I don't think, like the bulk of the commentators on this, the bulk that we would read in our conservative circles, they view Pilate as the bad guy with the black hat, and that he's dismissive of Jesus. And I don't buy into that interpretation. I think Pilate is engaged. I think he wants to get rid of the pain, but I think he believes Jesus is innocent. Thus, this is the third time. So we're going to take that perspective and move forward, that the fact that he's actually engaged with Jesus. His prior order to punish Jesus, Vince, you mentioned that earlier, comes from his internal need to make this whole thing go away. He just wants to get rid of this thing. He's hoping that through applying abuse, the crowd will be appeased. His whole idea is to provide satisfaction to the crowd. And he's using the tool of abuse to accomplish, that's his plan. Thus, he orders the flogging, and he either indirectly or directly gives permission to the guards to apply abuse, the crown of thorns, the purple robe, all in mockery, the slapping on the face, the beating, and now he escorts Jesus out to the crowd so he can display what he's done. Now, here's a side note. I think very few times, very few, the demonstration and permission to abuse seldom leads to a pity outcome. If I carry a hammer and I'm beating people with a hammer, uh, that is not going to stimulate pity and compassion. It's going to stimulate more of the same. The old adage, if you fight fire with fire, all you get is more fire. And that's exactly what Pilate, this is all he knows. I mean, this is all he knows. So in verse 5, to continue, his term, behold the man, and there have been countless sermons on this, behold the man. So let's look at what Pilate possibly was meaning. Pilate, he leads the broken and bleeding Jesus out for everyone to see, and he announces, behold the man. That's the context. My feeling is, and I'm not alone on this, but Pilate likely uses his phrase to try to stir pity, showing Jesus beaten and humiliated, hardly a threat to Rome, hardly a threat to them. They're not really concerned about Rome. And it's like he's saying, look at him. He's no king. He's just a broken man. Behold the man. Now, I think you're all aware that this phrase resonates with the Old Testament citation in the book of Zechariah 6:12. And in that book are the words, behold the man. And it's pointing to, I mean, we could talk a lot about that, but we're not going to. But it's referring to what he calls the branch, the coming branch, which is a prophetic reference to the Messiah. And within that term, he says, behold the man. John, I believe, he adopts that or adapts that to this occasion in the writing of his gospel. Now, going back to Pilate, I have no doubt Pilate said that. Whether Pilate intended it or not, John frames this as irony. Pilate announces more truth than he realizes. Behold, he is the man. Behold, he is the man. He is the one who is a depiction of what being truly human is all about. He is a man. He is the man, and there is um, a lot of irony within that whole thing. The crowd responds in 16a, and the chief priests and the officers saw him, Jesus. They shouted, crucify, crucify. All they wanted, notice how they shorten the phrase, they remove the him, personal pronoun, and they just say all they want is crucify. That's all they can see is the cross, the death tool, and that's what they're shouting. What Pilate intends as appeasement, hopefully the crowd will get enough, triggers escalation of violence. It's only getting worse. Thus, the pressure is mounting. He's got a mob on his hand. Manipulation by the leaders, the Jewish leaders, which is fueled by their collective fear. They view Jesus as a threat. It creates a narrowing of focus. They are down to one word, crucify, and it overrides any kind of rational interaction or response. I mean, they are being governed by their hate, by their fear, which is manifest in hate and amplified through the crowd cohesion of what is going on through identification of this perceived enemy. Viktor Frankl, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, and I believe I didn't go to the citation, but that's a great book. You haven't read it, but he looks at this. Viktor Frankl experienced the horrific experience of the Nazi concentration camps. And he wrote at one point, an abnormal reaction, which he saw quite frequently, abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation which he was in is normal behavior. And what he means is cruelty is modeled as when cruelty is modeled as normal, it draws others in and it becomes normal. The abnormal becomes normal. And that is through the idea of the mob mentality that we talked about last week. It just what people would normally do sitting at their kitchen table in a relaxed setting is nothing as what we see here. They're being drawn into that, and that by itself is part of part of being human. And that's what Viktor Frankl is referring to. And then another quote from Rene Girard, who I think Rene Girard really gives us a good model of how to look at this whole event through the scapegoat mechanism. It is just part of human nature to pick someone to blame. And that's what Girard's whole thesis was about, wrote extensively about it, and he called it the scapegoat mechanism. And that scapegoat mechanism, it depends on social permission. The people have to buy into it, which they do. I mean, through the whole scapegoat system, the Levitical system was all about scapegoating and about what the people needed in order to move on. We got to blame something so that we can feel better about ourselves. And I think it's a good way to look at it. So he says the scapegoat mechanism depends on social permissions, which is happening here. And because the violence isn't going to dissipate, it has to be channeled. So what we do is find a scapegoat in order to blame and to kill. The crowd never feels pity until revelation breaks the cycle. That's a really insightful comment by Rene Girard. This is where it's not about us as humans becoming better humans. We need the grace of God through revelation. Something has to be done in order for us to change. Now, I cited an example. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Braveheart. It's old, it's probably 30 years old now. But not the last scene, but the second to the last scene is where William Wallace he's caught, he's in prison, and he's going to be tortured and killed publicly. And that's where the scene where the princess she comes in, and that great scene where she says, "You're going to die." And he goes, "Everyone dies, but not every man lives." If you guys know what I'm talking about, have you seen the movie? Yeah, that's a great line. That's one of the famous lines. Well, anyway, in the next scene, he's brought out in a public display like this, and he's put on this big table in front of everybody on a platform, and they start using tools to basically dissect him while he's living, and they're torturing him. And the executioner carries it all out. They're going to get him to a point, and then they're going to chop his head off. And it's gross. I mean, I don't like to watch it. And then there's a time in that the crowd is watching this. They're enraged. They are what the crowd is on your image is what they are like. Crucify him, torture him, torture him. But then through that torture, they allow him a word, and then he has that final word that final phrase, which is so famous, he just yells out freedom. And then the crowd says mercy. They start chanting mercy, mercy, mercy. That is a small image of something from the outside was given to the crowd to see clarity for what it really was. And I would make that as an illustration of what revelation. Of course, we believe it's from God, who we know nothing unless God reveals it to us. And what we need is revelation. And what we have is revelation right here in this scene in the person of Jesus. It's Jesus is not cloaked. Jesus is showing us in all living color what God is like. And that's what we're going to get to at the scene. But anyway, that was my little illustration there. John's in 6b, we're looking at Pilate once again. And now, under the pressure, he abdicates, he gives over his leadership. Notice he is in the place of power entirely. And here he gives it over for the second time because of fear. When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they shouted, saying, "Crucify, crucify." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no ground for charges in his case." Absolutely. Third time. He's sarcastic, but yet it's revealing. Pilate yields moral authority to those he should be governing. He is giving up. He is giving up his rightfully given authority and privilege and giving that over because of fear. And then that is a typical human response. I mean, I know that of because he wants to get out from under the pressure. I'll just let you do it. Well, he can't do it. They don't have the authority, but he wants to get rid of it. In one of the other gospels says he washed his hands. Same kind of thing. The Roman governor surrenders Rome's justice to the mob's will. That's what's going on here. He is abdicating who he really is. And for us humans, it's a human condition. We humans, under pressure, tend to abdicate who we really are in Christ, it being in his image. And we act way less noble than how we were created. That's what's happening here. Psychological framing is, they call this avoidant leadership. He's avoiding his responsibility and his privilege, and it's caused by moral fatigue, which is actually collapse. It's the moral fatigue is to the point, fatigue through pressure. He's collapsing, and it has to do with social pressure. He is in fear of losing control. And it's all about control. It's all about ego here. He loses himself. He actually loses himself. And that is a very poor choice. He loses himself. When you and I maybe not you, but me, I know I have yielded and given up for fear. There are times in my life where I've made the poor choice because of fear. And that's exactly what we see Pilate doing. Whether God is not big enough, God is not in his frame of reference. But in my frame of reference as a follower of Jesus, there's been time when I have not been able to articulate it, but Jesus needs my help, is how I responded. And that is abdicating who I really am, because fear of loss of control. And now the flip side of all this, not the flip side, it's not the same coin, it's the same circumstance, but in the background, guys, I can't overemphasize this. This is what this is all about, according to John's gospel. We are to pay attention. Jesus is watching. Jesus remains silent. He is the stable reference amid hysteria. He doesn't resist, justify, or retaliate. This is just mind-boggling to me. He doesn't fight back, but he is not wavering. He is the stable reference. I love that phrase. Amid hysteria. His silence is not passive, but it's really about his presence. He is there. And guys, again, this is the revelation of God in human flesh. What we are seeing is this: the power of non-retaliatory love absorbing human fear, blame, and violence without reciprocation. That is a very concise and I think a great definition of what we are seeing happen before our eyes. And this is the demonstration of strength. This is strength. This is it. Now, if you're given a memory, which I am not, strength is this: to see clearly, absorb fully, and respond with love. That is the revelation of God through Jesus of Nazareth at this point. Yeah, as I said here, this is the revelation of who and what God looks like as revealed through human flesh. This is a great story. This is who God is like as depicted in human flesh. Can't overemphasize that. So in our table time, this is my own little story. In earlier days, and I think, Vince, going back, I think this is what you were referring to, although we didn't talk about it. In much of my earlier being a follower of Jesus, let's say, 19 or 20s, 30s, maybe into even my 40s, my earlier days, I somehow got the idea, no one told me this, but I got the idea that really we need to rush through this segment of the arrest and the trial and all of that. That's really not important. Because what's really important is the cross itself, because it was there Jesus paid it all. That is how I thought. Now, I think Jesus paid it all, but there is much more to it. I understand that differently today. Yes, Jesus paid it all, but John has helped me because he intentionally slows down this story, this segment within the story, to draw us into see something deeper, and that is this revelation of who God truly is, as displayed right here in this image, um, through Jesus of Nazareth. In Jesus of Nazareth, we witness the patience of God absorbing the full force of human cruelty, yet responding with relentless and unending love for all. So that this is the question. So first, there's two parts of this question, and then we'll talk about this. So in our lives, in your life, when pressure mounts, which we all know, and fear rises, which we also know, which character can you most identify with? Now, this isn't confession time. It's just, honestly, uh, where are you at in your journey? Pilate, the one succumbing to pressure, the crowd who is in absolute rage, uh, disconnected from reality, being controlled by rage, or the quiet Jesus watching humanity and allowing this all to occur. Boy, those are three. What can you most identify with? I'm not saying which one are you most like. I'm saying which one most resonates with you. And also, so we can talk about that, but really where we want to go is, and if this is, as I'm suggesting, a revelation of who and what God is in the person of Jesus, what does that mean to you in our daily journey right here, right now? What does that mean to you in in your life? So those are two, um, yeah, they're not easy questions, but what are your thoughts? The floor is open, fellas. Go ahead and speak out as you wish.
I've got a question for you.
Bill,
And the
oh,
question,
I didn't see you there. Yeah, good.
yeah, I see. I got to see that hand there. Do you hear you say God's responding with love? Um, I agree. I'm just trying to say, how do you see Him loving here?
That is a great question. Now, I've got opinion. I would like the group. I've talked the whole time. Could we ask that to the group? How is he? Rather than me, the answer man, which I'm not very good at, how is Jesus? That's a great question. How is Jesus loving, showing, demonstrating love at this moment? What do you guys think?
I say that he's showing love by paying the price. The price of his love. I look at that image that's on the screen, and I caught it last week the same time. The look of just sadness in Jesus that mankind was so broken, the creation was so broken that even though he knew he had to go to the cross to pay the price for it, he was just sad, just really sad of the state of affairs. So, you know, I think I identify most with the fact that Jesus was, just a heavy price that he had to pay, and his awareness of that.
Is his silence? I mean, would any other person about to be crucified be kind of passive like that? Like I can't fight back. What can I do? I mean, I agree, Bob, but I'm kind of going like, how's his response different than someone else who would be in that situation?
Well, what I'm seeing, Bill, is his response could have been Um, I am innocent. You guys are doing what is completely wrong, and you're gonna pay for it. He knows that God has the wherewithal to punish those
Yeah.
that are doing this for the wrong, and yet he doesn't do that. He
So
accepts.
lack of protesting.
Yeah, I think so. My thought was, if this were me and I were guilty, then I would be more like Christ because I would be accepting of whatever came my way. But Christ was innocent, but still accepting of what the judgment was on him. If if that were me and I were innocent, I'd be up in arms. I'd be, what is it? What do you mean?
Yeah.
You
What
just
are you
said I was
doing?
innocent. Now you're going to punch me.
I
I'd
want
be
my
all over the
lawyer.
place in protest. But Christ was silent. Christ wasn't, even though he was innocent and had every right to say, so you say I'm innocent, but you're going to punish me anyway? What gives?
Yeah.
That's kind of the response that I think most humans would have. And Jesus, being divine in addition to being human, has a response that shows us um, even when we are wronged, we still, as his followers, need to be responding in love, even in those times when we feel wronged.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. And thanks,
When,
Bob.
yeah, when's it right to speak up and when's it right to shut up?
Well, I think for me, speaking up is in defense of the faith, in defense of God. If it's just in defense of myself, then I need to probably shut up.
Thanks, Jeff. Other comments? Bill has raised a really good question. Bob and Jeff have responded to that question. In what way? I'm making the suggestion that Jesus is showing love through his silence. And,
Exactly.
and Bill is raised the question, well, how does he show that? I think, guys, we would all love to hear your thoughts.
Jesus,
I think there's a temptation, not that you're doing it, Mike, but I think there's a temptation when you um, speak of Jesus in Scripture, rather than addressing what's going on in Scripture, you start from a point of Jesus is love. Therefore, everything he does is loving.
Mhm.
And and so when he's eating a falafel, he's eating it with great love that no man has ever seen. You start
Great
to
love.
people start to embellish and to attribute things to him that the texts don't really say. When I read that section of scripture and I see Jesus silent, coincidentally, he is fulfilling the prophecy of he remained silent and did not defend himself. Whether he was consciously doing that or not, I don't know, because scripture doesn't say.
Yeah.
Well,
I
maybe
don't look at anything that he did as particularly different than another person in his situation would have done the same thing. He looks at the impossible defense that I'm not going to get anywhere by arguing. Let me just stand here till it's over.
Right.
I mean, I think that to say that him standing there till it's over is loving, I don't know. Scripture reveals that or not, unless you start with the premise everything Jesus does is loving, therefore doing that is loving.
Yeah, I
You know what I
would
mean?
hold that position. Thanks, Vince, for a counterpoint.
yeah, I
I
agree.
think I think
Someone
what
else could
you're
be standing there and be resigned too, but that's not
Yeah.
the point.
I didn't hear that, Bill.
But someone else could be standing there and be resigned to their fate also, but they wouldn't be Jesus.
Right, they're not, yeah, the Son of God. Well, you're certainly free to, I mean, we're all free to hold our, various views of things, but I quite clearly hold the view that yes, everything Jesus does is love, whether he's eating a falafel or doing. I am here. The incarnation, and from my perspective, is all about what it means to be truly human. And I think Jesus is demonstrating that in a profound way right here. So,
I think this is another example of the thing that I mention on occasion, the mystery, the grand mystery of
yeah, yeah,
how he can be fully man and fully God. And the man Jesus is silent here, but in his spirit, which is God, he was groaning, he was grieving, he was, as someone said, so very sad at what was happening and knew what the outcome was going to be. So I think the fact that we are physically silent at times isn't necessarily the issue or the point of the matter. Uh, it just means that we, for whatever reason, have not physically decided to express what's going on in our spirit, and only Jesus could have done that in this particular point because again, he's fully man and fully God. Um, if I can, I'd like to go personal just a minute because this really struck me a little earlier, Mike. And if you'll bear with me just a second, I think you'll find that it's relevant. And it's you asked the question early on, Pilate, the crowd, or the quiet Jesus, who do I identify with? At this point in time, I immediately said, well, I've got to identify with Pilate because here I am, an older man approaching 80, with a wife who's starting to walk through dementia, two prodigal children, one of whom is really off in a far field, and one who is struggling to be in a closer field, but they're both prodigals. And yet here I am as a guy who's supposed to be, wise and in charge and have control of everything. So in that context, I identify with Pilate. Providentially, over the last couple of 3 weeks, we've been blessed by a book that we were given, and I don't know whether you guys have ever seen or heard of that book,
Parables, wood cultures. No.
Parables and Wood Sculptures. It's by a guy by the name of John Christopher White, who happens to live here in Fort Collins, and
huh,
we didn't know that. But it's a fantastic book, and where he's a tremendous artist. I won't go into the detail of the art, although it's tremendous. But he also, in the pictures, he does the parables and expresses the story and uses scripture. And he also writes a brief poem about each one, or a brief parable. And this is the one that has been sticking with me the last several days in the context of the kind of thing that we're discussing here. And this is only 4 lines, but it really struck me. If you'll listen carefully, I think you'll see what I'm saying here. It reads, "Tiny hands hold a ball much greater than their grasp, like answers coming down from God, dwarf the questions we have asked."
Mm.
Mm,
wow.
yeah.
So we ask all these questions, and they pale in regards to the answers that were eventually given.
Hmm.
Back to mystery.
Yep.
What was the name of that book again?
Parables, Wood Sculptures by J. Christopher White.
Parables, Wood, Sculpture.
I'll send it. I'll send the info out to you guys.
Hey, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And Dave, thanks for sharing that little tidbit there. Of course, we're all somewhat aware of what's going on, and all of our hearts are with you at this.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't, and this is in a way what Dave Brown said. This is in all these situations, these scenes are hard to understand if you don't know the backstory. I mean, there's a guy waiting to be crucified. Okay, so what? Well, the backstory is huge.
And can you
Well, I mean, we're
turn
talking
in on
about
that a little
what
bit?
if somebody else is standing there and they're resigned to be crucified and stuff. I mean, the point is, who is this guy? And Vince made the point, it's Jesus. You're reading John, you're at the end of a book. And so everything leading up to here, what's God going to do? God's going to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to, well, we do need to bring that into the story. It helps inform what's going on. And and I think again, it's another point of why we need to pay attention to why, John took so much time to drag this story out for us for a reason.
Yeah.
I've always read, and I tend to think of Jesus more in the human sense than many do, because of, in all these ways he was tempted like unto man, yet without sin. If everything he does is superhuman, then I can't relate to him at all in my mind. It's like, well, Jesus is eating
Yeah.
a veal cutlet or something. Like he would never spit out gristle. That's, Jesus wouldn't do that. He would never be disappointed with the fare. How could I possibly live up to that? I kind of think he was just a regular guy, and he was learning along the way. And he got tired when he walked. And it's like, I think I'm done. Let's camp here, rather than summon some universe creating power that only he has and keep on moving when a normal person wouldn't be able to. I think we're reading a lot into the scriptures when we take that kind of a mindset. I've always took the mindset of what would Jesus do? He would probably do what I do, except he'd do it a lot better. He would do it a lot purer. He'd do it with a lot less jealousy and hatred. But he's not from another planet. I mean, he's a person. You
I
know,
gotta yeah, Vince, I got to clarify that. I mean, when I say he's God being man. He said, I'm here, I guess, empathy. That he's showing us kind of, if as God is a man, how to behave. I agree, it was a little confusing. Yes, the fact is God doing that and behaving or actually suffering as a man is the power of this picture.
That's a nice trailer.
the hypostasis that we wrestle with is very difficult because it's a theory that we humanity have come up with to explain why Jesus is so different than everybody else. And we kind of throw it in as an excuse for him being so much better than me. Well, he's God too, but I mean, Jesus was 11 at one time, walking around Mary and Joseph's house. Was he God? I mean, was he going around resurrecting flowers and bringing chickens back to life and things? Or was he just a kid, just learning how to build a table? You know what I mean? He was a person, and then he grew in wisdom. When you grow in wisdom, you get the implication that there was a point where you were less than in wisdom. You know what I mean? It's an evolution of life, and he's becoming more and more. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I don't know if a 3-year-old Jesus could make that statement.
If we take that reasoning, which I mean, we're all struggle with the mystery of the hypostatic union, as Dave said. But if you take the reasoning that yes, he is human, he's fully human, and there's a message within that, I I see a fully human Jesus. The very fact that he is innocent knowingly, personally, the fact that the ruler over him has pronounced him innocent 3 times, he's experiencing great abuse and pain, but he remains silent. To me, Vince, that is an extraordinary response in light of the fact of his humanness. And I think that's what we're attempting to struggle with. No, I mean, none of us have the answer, but I see that as extraordinary.
Well, he wanted out. Remember? He said,
Yeah.
"Is there a way out of this?"
Yeah,
The Garden of
you mean in the
Gethsemane.
Garden of Gethsemane? If there's any
Yeah.
other way, let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a thought, Vince, as you were talking, because I struggle with that thought too. You know, was he Superman? Could he just, absorb all this pain and not really feel pain like we would, and that sort of thing. But what I see in this picture is the difference between our response, my response, and Christ's response
Mhm.
is that, and Mike said something about it earlier, and that's how Pilate is responding in a human way out of fear. So our responses many times come out of fear. Christ's silence, Christ's response to all of this is out of trust.
Right.
And we can follow that at times in our lives where our response is better because we're trusting. But too often, and that's why I kind of put myself in the Pilate camp here when you ask that question, Mike, is that too many times I respond out of fear. I want to blame somebody else because I fear the outcome of whatever situation this is. And I want to shed that fear off on somebody else. But Christ is not doing that. Christ is responding out of a trust in God, knowing that God has him in his hand, and he had asked, like Bill said, he said, "Not my will be done, but yours." So he knows through all of this that God's will is being done, and he trusts that. And if we can kind of approach life like that, then our responses will be more Christ-like as we respond out of trust rather than fear.
Well, the
Yeah.
painter here, I appreciate what I see there is sympathy. Sympathy. I mean, I see a look of like sympathy for the whole scene.
Yeah, a lot more color here.
And of course, you guys all realize this image is out of my head. So
Yes.
who knows? I mean, it's my perception. So, yeah.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's a very good image
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
It just to look at that puts more value on what Christ did for me.
So there's moving to that. Thank you, Bob. Yeah.
Well, and that's like what I was saying. If I put myself in this picture as Pilate, then I can picture Jesus looking down on me when I'm making stupid decisions or hurting somebody out of fear in my life. He's looking down and going, "Oh, Jeff, I love you so much. Why are you screwing up? Why are you not trusting me?" That's the look I'm getting out of him in that picture.
He is going to say, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." I mean,
Yeah.
that's a powerful statement.
That's where it's headed. Yeah. And that's pretty clear in all of, well, I don't know if all the gospels, but yeah, the thing here that really hits me is the fact that when I am in conflict, which is part of our human existence, what is my response? Is it out of fear of protection, of protecting my ego, of being right, or even protecting God? I think Jeff said that earlier, the idea of, do I really think that I can protect God? It's or what the alternative uh, is just allowing it to happen without
Mike,
me intervening because of trying to save my own skin.
I know my response. There's a fourth response here you didn't put up, and that's a response a lot of the disciples did: run away.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what Pilate is doing with his abdication of leadership. He's running away. because there's no other, he's kind of at the end of his toolkit, all of the stuff he's experiencing. So, yeah.
I can't comprehend the women who just sat there and allowed themselves to have to watch this play out.
Yeah. It's painful to watch it, to engage it, and to be here at this time. We got a little bit more we got to get through, but yeah.
It's interesting to me, and this is just a rabbit trail, I guess, but can you imagine going into a court of law and having the judge say, I find the defendant not guilty, but I'm going to punish him anyway.
Right.
That is absurd, and that's kind of what Pilate has done here. He's like, I don't find anything that this guy has done anything wrong, but I'm going to punish him anyway. And then when they say that punishment is not enough, he goes even further and says, okay, well, it's laid on you guys now. I'm abdicating the sentence that I'm giving. You're saying you want it done, go ahead. And then they said, no, we can't. And he says, okay, well, because you've, said I need to crucify this guy, I'll crucify him even though he's innocent, and that is such an absurd picture if you look at it in a court of law today, that somebody is found not guilty, but he gets life imprisonment anyway.
That is exactly right, Jeff. He's actually, I declare you innocent, but I'm going to whip the crap out of you. I mean, that is what we're seeing. It's absolutely absurd.
But that happened before the crucifixion. That was sort of standard preparation for anybody, I guess, before they even declared the verdict. It was a cruel Rome.
Yeah. Any other comments? It's a hard thing to watch, and as Dave has reminded us, and Vince also, there's a lot of mystery here, fellas. It is, but I will say this, that with my path through this time, I too have really gained appreciation for who God is in Jesus of Nazareth. Mm-hmm. And if that is true, it's a demonstration of the kind of God we worship, the kind of God we believe in, as demonstrated here, which is, I think it's extraordinary. So, fellas, thank you for joining in, and we're going to meet next week. Today's the 22nd. We'll meet on the 29th. I'll be here. And we'll continue on with the first part of John. We'll get through this. And we know the end of the story. It gets better.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for
guys. See you, everybody.
Have a good week.